Welcome to the Great Reboot. I'm Tori Ryden. Many people around the world are reporting that this pandemic has given them some time to do some important self-reflection. I've heard from friends and family that this time has given them some pause to take stock of what is really important in their lives. Others have said they've been considering doing some volunteer work, trying to help others' lives. They're thinking what their legacy to the world will be. So consider this, if you will. There are 125,000 children and teenagers 18 and under in the U.S. and in foster care who are currently awaiting placement. 125,000. These are kids who already are riddled with anxiety, who got the short end of the stick, experiencing COVID-19 in a very different way than most children. Their own family life didn't work out, so now they're hoping for a second, a third, a fourth, possibly even a fifth chance. This time, they're really hoping for a family that will work for them. A Family for Me is a partnership between Spurwing Services and the Maine Department of Health and Human Services. And our special guest to the Great Reboot is Rebecca Beal, a licensed social worker with 25 years of experience in the field. Her background includes 11 years of experience recruiting and developing foster adoptive parents in the state of Maine. She now applies that experience to her current position as a program advisor of A Family for Me. And Becky, thank you so much for being with us here on the Great Reboot.
Thank you, Tori.
You know, I have been hearing from so many people who are looking around their homes. They're spending a lot of times at home, obviously, and they're sheltering in place thinking, is there something I can be doing for other people? Is there a space in my house that's not being put to use that maybe I can be helping other people? And, you know, you hear this number, which is a gigantic number, 125,000 kids waiting to be placed in a home. So let's kind of go from there as our launching pad, because there are a lot of people who have extra space and a lot of kids in need. So I know Maine is going to be dramatically less than 125,000, but still the numbers are significant.
Yes, and there's actually over 400,000 children nationwide currently in foster care here in the United States, and 125 children who are waiting for forever families or adoptive placements here in Maine.
That's 125,000, is that what you're saying?
125,000, yes, correct. And here in Maine, we have over 2,200 children in care, and we have 500 of those children are going to be entering adoptive placements. So we certainly have plenty of ways that people can reach out, they can be a part, and we really like to share with people that taking care of our children is really everybody's responsibility. And so we like to welcome people into that circle and really provide them with a variety of ways that they can be a part of holding those children up.
You know, it's interesting. I was watching something the other day, and the Native Americans consider children to be sacred, that they are their holy ones. And so they rally around them, and that's I don't want to generalize, because I know that there are probably some children who are also in need of foster care on reservations. But it was really interesting to hear that kind of a description of the child being sacred or holy.
I think we could all agree, at the very least, that these children they're our future. These are our future leaders, the people who are going to live in our communities. And so that's why we really consider this to be a shared responsibility for all of us to give these children families, and not placements necessarily. Children need families.
Let's talk about a Family for Me, and also I'd love for you to kind of speak to the idea that this is a time that is so anxiety fueling for adults and for kids, but I can't imagine how much more difficult it must be for kids who are just waiting for a home. Kind of take us down that path, if you would, and also explain to us A Family for Me. How does it all work?
Yes, absolutely. So I can definitely speak from personal experience that there has been some anxiety, some uncertainty. We're just not sure. It's a difficult time for people to plan, for example, because we're just a bit uncertain about the future. And so as adults with lots of coping skills and tools, we can certainly assume that children are really feeling the impact of that uncertainty as well. And so our responsibility at a family for me was to really view this situation as not being necessarily pandemic connected or driven, because we know that we need resource families all the time. That's a constant, ongoing need for children nationwide and here in Maine. And so we really decided to focus on how do we take this work that we do, which is so relational, so based in the community, how do we make the shift and really be able to provide opportunities for families to explore, to partner with us, to volunteer, that they can do using technology. And so that's been our life for the last 6 months. And with the support of the Department of Health and Human Services, we've been able to provide the first step to becoming a resource parent with a web-based training, so that people can really start to explore whether this is a good fit for them from the comfort of their own home while they are sheltering in place.
And this is, Becky, not to interrupt, but this is a real departure from what you had traditionally had. And I know that there were some pretty long classes, right? Wasn't there kind of a larger in-person commitment?
Absolutely. So absolutely. And so what we start with is what we call an informational meeting, which is a 2-hour introductory session, if you will. Those have traditionally always been done in person at the Department of Health and Human Services offices, with lots of people and supports there to really stand around folks who are interested. So that's completely web-based now. And if people take that, then decide, yes, we want to take that next step, then for right now, the Department of Health and Human Services has actually waived the longer training, the 18-hour resource family introductory training. They're moving forward with getting people licensed, and they're asking people to make the commitment that once we are able to offer that in-person training again, that people will sign up and they'll complete that. And so it's really required a good deal of flexibility on everyone's part. And so far, we've been very successful. We've engaged people. You're right. People are interested, and they're at home and they're saying, what can I do to make a difference? And so we're reaching out. We have a watch party coming up over the next 2 weeks. And so just really trying to see what kind of resources we have and make that shift.
Let's give, if you would, let's give some information on where people can check out. First of all, let's give your website, and let's also point people to where they can actually sit through the training videos and watch them and see if that's something that they could do.
The nice part is that it's all the same place. So if they go to a familyformemaine.org, they can find out some facts about being resource parents. They can sign up to do what we call the informational training, the first step. They can also look at some pictures of children here in Maine who are waiting for their forever families. So there's a range of information on our website. So again, a familyformemaine.org. We just encourage people to come and meet us. Say hello, take a look at the site. We have staff information and pictures. And it's a great way to start the exploration of what do I want to do and how can I connect with this process.
So Becky, I hear it all the time when people say, well, if I were to foster, I would prefer to have a newborn to a young child. And I think the idea is because they're, a little concerned about taking on history, and maybe they don't feel that they're prepared to kind of deal with what might come along with that history. maybe, take us through that. And is that a misnomer? And is that something that, people can move beyond? And do you have sources and resources that can help people to better, to better deal with that idea?
Sure, absolutely. And I always appreciate an opportunity to do a bit of stigma busting about our older children in care. Because you're right, there is a great deal of stigma around older children, both from the perspective of foster care and adoption placement. And so we often share with people that if we could think back to our own lives and our own experiences as teenagers, that if we had a family, we were fortunate enough to be able to test the waters, maybe make some mistakes. That's really what being a teenager is about. And if you have a family, that gives you that safe platform from which to really do that exploration. And the other thing we would point out is when people say, I'd like to foster an infant, we absolutely need homes who are willing to foster both teenagers and infants. But when you're fostering a very young child, because the goal is always reunification, there's typically quite a bit of visitation involved in that. We want newborns and infants to meet with biological parents so that they can form that attachment. So it is a bit of an assumption that having a newborn is going to be an easier experience than having an older child in your home who can communicate with you and who really, can engage, can do some activities with you. We jokingly say to people, you should consider fostering a teen because they'll help you with your technology. But there's an element of truth in that. And some of the older children and teens, I have to say, that I've had the pleasure of working with are amazing human beings. They're very resilient, they're very courageous, and I have to say, it's so difficult when you hear them say, I don't think that, nobody's going to want me. Nobody's going to want to provide an adoption placement for me. And that's really a sense that some of our older kids in care have. They steel themselves against that rejection. And they, more so arguably than any other age group, are in the position where they most need a family. Because think about it. The first time that you had a flat tire or you needed to cook a chicken, had no idea what to do, most of us don't call a caseworker. Most of us call a parent or a relative. And so those kids need that level of support in their day-to-day functioning. And again, it really makes a huge difference in their long-term outcomes around things like education, employment, finance. These kids are our future.
Oh, hearing you say that nobody's going to want me, it just makes me cry. There are just so many beautiful kids, and it's not their fault. Not their fault, that's the hardest part of it all. So, Becky, I'm wondering what makes a really good foster parent? What are you looking for? What are the qualities and characteristics that you look for in foster parents or a home? Let's kind of flesh that out. What are the qualities?
Flexibility is always helpful. A sense of humor is very helpful, and also, a desire to meet people where they are, and the ability to meet people where they are, and to understand that if we look at the experiences that children have, even through the lens of an adult, we can really empathize. So I think we can all think back to maybe a situation like a first date and how that felt to meet someone and be presenting yourself hopefully in the best light. And so a lot of times children entering foster homes are having similar experiences because the way that we attach and relate to people, it's really pretty similar across all those ages and stages. So people who understand that and people who have really flexible and reasonable expectations often make great foster parents. Sometimes when a child enters your home, what they need is a bit of space. So being aware of that and not feeling as though that's a rejection of you per se. That kiddo is adjusting. So flexibility is so important.
You had mentioned that with the foster placements, and I think particularly with babies and young kids, that there's always that effort to try to reunite, and the reunification with family, with blood family. Does that also hold true for teenagers, and I guess how often does that happen?
Absolutely. So reunification is always the number one goal when a child enters care. And the department engages in something that they call concurrent planning. So from the very first day that a child enters care, the Department of Health and Human Services is working a plan to shore the family up, provide them with supports and resources so they can be together as a healthy family unit. And they're also thinking about, if that's not possible, they're looking for opportunities for adoptive placement for that child if reunification isn't possible. The reason why that runs on that dual track is because we know from just scads of research and data the importance of family. It's absolutely critical for a child's well-being and success down the road. And so that has to be the number one goal. If this child has the best opportunity to have a family, hopefully their biological family.
How often, I don't know if you have a percentage or a stat on this, but how often are foster kids adopted by that foster family, that first foster family?
And so I don't have any specific statistics on how often the child is adopted by their first foster family, but I can tell you that when children aren't able to reunify and the plan becomes adoption, it's very common, about 40% of the time, that a foster family becomes that child's adoptive family and forever family. Foster families and resource families get very bonded. It's tough to not love little people when they come into your house, or medium-sized people too. So once you figure out the flow and how that person enters your family and the rhythm, then typically we do see resource families who say, yeah, we can't let them go. We need to keep them in our family if that's what they need is the family.
At the beginning of the show, I set it all up by saying that they might be looking for a first, second, third, fourth, or fifth family. Is this finally going to be the family? What kind of stories have you heard of kids going through? What's the highest number of foster families that you've heard of that a child's had to kind of go and live temporarily with?
So because every case is so individualized, it's very difficult. And we also have what we call respite families. So these are resource families who are fully licensed, but really they focus solely on providing respite for children. So if another foster family is planning a trip, and they're not able to bring children, or they need a break, then these respite families step forward and the children go, and they might spend a brief period of time, a temporary period of time with that other family. So it's really hard to say specifically, but we do have children that have had multiple placements. And absolutely, undeniably, each placement that a child has and then has to transition in and out of, that really does compound emotional trauma for that kiddo. So that can make it very difficult. And again, putting ourselves in that position, we can really empathize, because if we learn to trust and we learn to get along and we learn to settle into something, and then all of a sudden that changes, that makes us as adults feel anxious. And so it's easy to understand how that could impact children who have multiple placements.
To give us kind of a better understanding, and people are watching not just in Maine, they're watching all over the world, and I'm wondering, as far as what you're seeing, does it matter if somebody's in the city or in the country? I mean, are there just kids in need in every pocket of every, city or hamlet around the country? Is that what we're talking about?
Rural, urban, across all socioeconomic levels. We have a need that just spans everything. And abuse and neglect occurs across all of those dimensions as well. So absolutely, it's really impossible to pinpoint. This is where kids come into care.
What has the opioid epidemic and other substance use disorders, what has that done as far as numbers of kids who are now in foster care?
We have seen an exponential increase in the number of children entering care since the opioid crisis has really hit, so to speak, in Maine. And so it's absolutely had an impact. And I think it's safe to say that overall, there are many more young children coming into care as a result, because now we have screening process in the medical field. So when moms are pregnant, it's often identified at that stage that they may have some issues with drug dependency. And so we have a lot of infants that are coming into care, and we really need families who are willing to be resource families for infants, with the understanding that those infants are in reunification and need to have several visits to attach to biological parents. And so it has absolutely changed the face of what we do. When we started this latest iteration of recruitment here in Maine, we had 1,460 children in care. And so 4 years later, we're now looking at 2,200, over 2,200 children in care. So I think that in itself is very telling.
You've heard a lot of stories in your career, and you've gotten to know a lot of kids. I'm assuming that you know a lot. What's kind of touched you deeply? What are the stories that stick with you that just tell you, you know what, I'm doing the right thing right now, being part of a family for me? What are some of those stories, if you'd share?
So definitely, I would have to say resilience and working with teenagers and just really getting to know some of these children in a way that people rarely have the opportunity to do. For example, before the shelter-in-place order, we would hold adoption matching events where we would have children who needed adoption or forever family. They would come, and we would invite licensed resource families who are interested in adoption, and we would do fun activities. And I had a young man, 15 years old, who went to one of those events and just really immediately came in, walked right up to me and said, "How can I be helpful?" And he was super helpful all day long, with not only with setup, but mentoring some of the younger children in just a wonderful, calm, and patient way. These kids are just amazingly resilient and courageous, and they have great senses of humor. And some of these kids are real, to see them succeed is absolutely the best. And they do it, they do it on their own with the support of those families that wrap around them. That's the most rewarding by far.
And what do you hear from the families who decide to, maybe they say now's the time to foster, and they decide maybe we'll take a look at like teenagers and not just really young ones? What are some of the stories you're hearing from them about, joy or hardship or any of that? Has it seemed to be, less hardship, more joy for them?
Yeah, I think of two pieces of information or points that kind of bubble up for me when you ask that. Number one, I'm thinking of a particular foster parent who has added several older children to her family by adoption. And she shared a story. She did an interview with me. And she really said this was a progression. I didn't step forward and say, gosh, I'm looking to add 3 teenagers to my family. She started with fostering younger children. And so this just became a natural progression. And she met some of these older children. And it just was a really nice fit for her family. And then she slowly, over time, became a champion for teens and really is out there talking to people and helping bust some of that stigma around older children. So I think that that's always heartwarming when you have people that you see naturally evolve into being stigma busters. And then the other thing that I hear fairly consistently from families who adopt is how amazing it was for them and for their child that once the permanency piece came into play and that child knew you're not going anywhere. Even if you make a mistake, even if you know, it's not always perfect, you're not going anywhere. Overwhelmingly, we hear people say that a lot of the behaviors and the anxious feelings and the worry that the children hold really starts to dissipate because now they have a stable base. And that's what kids need. They need that stable base where they understand that even when they're not perfect, that they have a home, they have a family that loves them.
We're not sure, none of us can be sure when things are going to go either back to normal or we'll kind of figure out what a normal is. But what's your big hope, Becky, that people, what's the takeaway from COVID-19 that you hope will then reflect back to a family for me? And, you know, what are you looking for any kind of a great reboot among just the regular people, the families out there? What are you hoping for? What's your big wish out of all of this?
I think the first thing that comes forward for me is that May is National Foster Parent Appreciation Month, and it's a great opportunity for me to sing the praises of our resource families who are making it work, who are making a shift, who are homeschooling, managing careers, and shelter-in-place order. So these are amazing people that just bumped it up a whole notch. And so I have great respect for those folks, and I genuinely want to say thank you. I think for us as a program, we're looking forward to really examining what kind of technological shifts worked very well for this system. What helped people to come forward? And really, we're in a day and age where things really do need to be driven by technology. It's the wave of the future. That's how we communicate often. And so we really want to see what practices did we implement on the fly, so to speak, that we really ought to integrate more long-term so that we can make it easier for people to learn more, to step forward, to volunteer. So that's really going to be our goal moving forward when things do start to open.
Sounds to me that you're already taking all the great, powerful steps through creating this virtual training system, and it sounds like that's going to lead to, you know, more foster families in a quicker way and really a more manageable way, so people can do this, you know, in the comfort of their own homes and not have to go someplace to get this done. So it sounds like you're already on the right path, and that reboot is really going to make a big difference for you.
We're very excited, and we're just so thankful and relieved that we've been able to maintain a constant presence, even though we're not able to be face-to-face, because the work that we do is just so historically very relational. We're out in the community, we raise awareness, we try to educate folks, we engage. And so that's been our work lately, is how do we do that without leaving home?
Well, Becky Beal, I just can't thank you more for joining us here on the Great Reboot. Love to hear about these kids, and I'd love to get an update from you so we can pass that along to the folks who are, you know, checking us out here on the Great Reboot. And, you know, maybe we can also share resources for people who are in other states and maybe other countries as well, because this is certainly not just a Maine problem. It's a real big global issue, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I mean, we go back to the national number of 400,000 children in care here in the United States, almost 500,000 children. It's a staggering number. It's a staggering number. So afamilyformemaine.org, we'd love to have you come and visit us. So several different ways that you can reach out to us. We'll get back to you. We're happy to inform you.
Becky Beal, I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.